Imagine a church where the pews are filled with people, yet the air is thick with tension. This isn't just any Sunday morning service, it's a storm brewing in the heart of the Reformed Church. The doctrinal winds are so strong that they threaten to tear the very fabric of the congregation apart. It started with a simple question: what does it mean to be chosen by God? For centuries, Reformed churches have wrestled with this question. But now, the debate has taken on a life of its own. Some say that God has chosen a select few for salvation, while others argue that God's love is so vast that He has a plan for everyone. This divide has deepened, creating a chasm that seems impossible to bridge. In the early 1900s, a man named Herman Hoeksema was at the forefront of this controversy. He was a theologian and pastor who firmly believed in the Reformed doctrine of predestination. According to this view, God has chosen some people for salvation from the beginning of time, and those who are not chosen are left to their fate. This doctrine, known as reprobation, was central to the Reformed faith enshrined in the Canons of Dort, a set of teachings that emerged from a significant synod in 1618 to 1619. But not everyone agreed with Hoeksema. Men like James Daane and G.C. Berkouwer began to challenge this traditional view. They argued that the idea of reprobation was too harsh and didn't align with the loving nature of God as revealed in the Bible. Daane wrote in his book, The Freedom of God, "Any doctrine of reprobation is illegitimate by biblical standards, except that which biblical teaching sanctions, that he who rejects God, God rejects." This debate wasn't just academic, it had real-world consequences. It led to splits within churches, heated arguments, and even the questioning of the authority of the creeds and the formula of subscription, which were foundational documents for Reformed churches. One of the key points of contention was the well-meant offer of the gospel. This is the idea that when preachers invite everyone to come to Christ, they genuinely mean it for everyone, even those who are not predestined for salvation. Hoeksema and his followers rejected this idea, arguing that it contradicted the Reformed doctrine of particular grace, which holds that God's call to salvation is only for those He has chosen. This conflict wasn't limited to a few isolated churches. It spread across the Reformed world, from the Netherlands to the United States. The Christian Reformed Church, one of the largest Reformed denominations, was particularly affected. In 1977, a theologian named Harry R. Bohr submitted a formal objection to the Church's teachings on reprobation, but the Church's response was lukewarm. Leaving many feeling unheard and disillusioned, the debate also spilled into the academic world. Theologians like Louis Berkhof and Francis Turretin wrote extensively on the subject, trying to navigate the complexities of divine sovereignty and human responsibility. Turretin, in particular, made a distinction between God's will of decree, His sovereign plan, and His will of command, what He commands humans to do, which became a crucial point in the discussion. As the storm raged on, the Reformed Church faced a fundamental question: could it hold onto its traditional doctrines while also embracing a more inclusive understanding of God's love? The answer wasn't clear, and the tension continued to simmer. Waiting for a resolution that seemed as elusive as ever in the pews, the faithful were torn. Some clung to the old ways, finding comfort in the certainty of God's sovereign plan. Others yearned for a more open and loving God, one who had a place for everyone. The debate was far from over, and the future of the Reformed Church hung in the balance. As we wrap up our exploration of the doctrine of grace, it's clear that the teachings of Abraham Kuyper and the Canons of Dort have left a profound mark on Reformed theology. Kuyper's work, especially his thoughts on common grace and particular grace, challenges us to think deeply about how God's grace operates in the world and in our lives. Kuyper's writings, particularly in Degumin Gracie, Common Grace, and Dat de Genade Particulier, is, that grace is particular, show that grace is not a one-size-fits-all concept. Common grace, according to Kuyper, is the grace that God extends to all people, regardless of their belief, allowing the world to function and people to experience some level of goodness and order. However, particular grace is the specific, saving grace that God bestows upon the elect, those He chooses for salvation. This distinction is crucial because it helps us understand the balance between God's general goodness to all and His special love for His chosen people. The Canons of Dort, a significant document from the Reformed tradition, further emphasize this point. They remind us that God's grace is both free and powerful, but it is also particular. God does not force salvation on anyone. Rather, He calls and draws those He has chosen, ensuring that they will come to Him. This doesn't mean that others are left without any grace, but it does mean that the ultimate salvation of the elect is secured by God's sovereign will. Hyper-Calvinism, on the other hand, is a dangerous deviation from these teachings. It suggests that because God has already chosen who will be saved, there's no point in offering the gospel to everyone. This view can lead to a lack of evangelism and a misunderstanding of God's character. The canons of Dort and Kuyper's writings both reject this idea, emphasizing that we should preach the gospel to all, trusting that God will bring those He has chosen to faith. Kuyper also stresses the importance of preaching the gospel out of obedience to God, not out of a desire for personal glory. He reminds us that the true motive for sharing the good news should be a heart that is devoted to God's will and a deep desire to see others come to know Him. This is a powerful reminder for all of us, whether we are preachers, missionaries, or simply believers sharing our faith with friends and family. In the end, the doctrine of grace as taught by Kuyper and the canons of Dort is a call to live in the tension of God's sovereign grace and human responsibility. It's a call to trust in God's plan while actively participating in His work of bringing people to Himself. As we move forward, let's embrace this balance, knowing that God's grace is both broad and deep, and that our role in spreading it is both crucial and humbling.